Hello my friends and welcome back to another video. Today is going to be my January wrap up. Before I get started, I want to remind you that I am trying something different on my channel. So for the first half of January, I did a recent reads where I kind of did a little mini wrap up for the books that I had read in the first 2 weeks of January. And so now for this wrap up, I am covering what I read in the second half of January. So I only have 7 books here to talk about. I'm trying this out to see if it's a little bit easier on me, editing wise, filming wise, remembering books wise. I want to be able to review the books a little bit more thoroughly, and it's hard when I try to recap the whole month. I definitely remember the second half of the month's books better when I do my typical monthly wrap-ups, so I am trying this to see if it works a little bit better, if you all like it. You all gave me a lot of positive feedback on the recent reads video I posted, so I just want to let you know if you're looking for the second half of my reads, you will have to go and look at the recent reads video. I'll link it down below in case you missed it and you want to see what I read in the first half of January. So I think that's it. I'm just going to start at the bottom of the barrel, work our way up to the tippy top, my favorite books of the month, and it's gonna be the same kind of thing, just smaller amount of books to hopefully make it a little bit easier on myself and hopefully give you better reviews of each book. But let's get into it and talk about what I read in the second half of January. First up is the only 2-star book I have, and that is Reckless Girls by Rachel Hawkins. This is a thriller. I'm using thriller in quotations because I truly don't believe this is a thriller. I believe it's more of a mystery drama, I guess. It's not really that mysterious in my opinion, but let me give you a plot synopsis. This book is about the main character Lux and her boyfriend Nico. They get this kind of job to take these 2 women to a deserted island on their boat, and they want to go to this deserted island to kind of like party, have a vacation, whatever. And so Lux and Nico end up taking the 2 women, and when they get there, there's another boat with another couple on there. So the 6 of them kind of hit it off. They become friends. They drink together, they're hanging out, they're just having like a good old wild fun, time. Then this mysterious 7th person shows up and he kind of ruins the vibe that they all have going on, and then things start getting, I guess, intense. It depends on who you ask. For me, it wasn't really intense, but I assume that is when the author wanted things to get intense in the book. So first, I am going to say that I am not a fan of summer thrillers usually. I don't really gravitate towards them. I don't find them as exciting or as thrilling as I do thrillers set in the winter elements or the winter season. I don't know why. It's just summer doesn't really do much for me in terms of reading, like, atmosphere, I guess. It just doesn't really, I don't know, it just doesn't make me excited. This book is extremely predictable. I knew from very early on what was going on. Along with it being predictable, it's also very boring. Nothing really happens the entire time. I mean, literally nothing happens. It's just about the 6 of them being on this island, being around each other. And I guess there's drama, but the drama is not really that exciting or that thrilling in my opinion. It just felt like drama that really didn't need to be there. It wasn't necessary, and there is no tension or thrilling parts to this book. Like, that's why I personally don't believe that it is a thriller. There is no thrilling atmosphere. There's no tension. There's no, again, it's predictable, so you can guess everything that's going to happen. So I really feel like this is a mislabeled book. It just is not a thriller in my opinion. The characters are all really annoying. I didn't care about any of them. I thought they were all just kind of like whiny and annoying, and I don't know, they weren't like super bad characters. They just were not very likable. I just didn't really care one way or another about them. Like, their drama didn't interest me. Their drama wasn't exciting to me. Their personalities didn't make me like them. There just wasn't really anything fun about these characters. They were just very meh. They were just very typical, very average, like whiny, annoying, dramatic characters. The other thing about this book that I think is very weird is the deserted island that they are on has this like really bad, dark history, right? Like mysterious history, and it comes up all the time. They bring it up all the time. But it really has nothing to do with the story. Like, there is no reason that this stuff is being included except, I guess, to add atmosphere. But to be honest, it really didn't do much. It was just like really unnecessary information being like put onto the reader that had no purpose. There was no reason for us to need to know all of this. And it was just kind of annoying to read about this island all the time when it really didn't do anything for the plot. Like I said, the action doesn't really happen until like 80% into the book, and even then it's not really that exciting. Like, it just all kind of happens at once and you're just kind of like, okay, I read this whole book for that? Okay, awesome, great, I'm over it. Again, the ending was extremely predictable. I knew where it was going from really early on, so the ending didn't really do anything for me. The one plus that I think this book does have to it is it's really bingeable. Like, nothing really happens throughout the book, but the chapters are very short and it's very easy to just flip through it fairly quickly. So I read it really fast and it was very easy to read. It's just nothing happens, like, at all. The whole book, nothing happens, and so this was definitely a miss for me. I probably will not read anything else by Rachel Hawkins. I just don't think this author is for me, and yeah, I'm really sad that I didn't like this more. Next is a 3-star book, and that is Go Down Hard by Ali C. This was actually my Patreon book club's pick for January, so we all read this and we are about to have our live discussion on this book this weekend, so I'm really excited to talk about it. But I didn't love this book, unfortunately. So to summarize this plot, it's about Meg and Jack. They are both killers and they end up meeting and having this connection. They can't tell if this connection is more like lust or if it's like, I want to make you my prey. That's all I can really say because it's a very short novella. It's only 155 pages, so I don't want to like spoil the book, but there's just something about this I couldn't get on with, and I'm pretty sure that I had a lot of issues with the tone of this book and the pacing of this book. There are chapters in the past and then there are chapters in the present. In the past chapters, you get a look at the character Meg more and just kind of see what happened to her. It does deal with sexual assault and rape, so the chapters are very like, they're not super graphic, but they are very hard to read. I think the biggest issue for me though is those past chapters, they're very serious in a tone, right? Because they are dealing with very heavy subject matter. And the rest of the book has this kind of jokey comedic undertone, like silly, I guess. I don't like saying that, but it just has this like silly undertone to it, so it's kind of jarring to have these past chapters be so serious and then the present chapters be so jokey. And I personally don't love comedy in my horror. A lot of the time it's very hard for me to have comedy in my horror because it's just not usually done in a way that I like, and for me this just came off kind of cheesy and over the top in a way that I didn't love. The pacing is really quick because it's under 200 pages, and so once you hit the 100-page mark, things start happening, and it felt like it took too long to get there, which is weird because it's a fast-paced book. So I thought that, I don't know, I figured that when Meg and Jack met, it would have been at the very beginning and the whole book was gonna be them having like a cat and mouse game, you know, it was gonna be more tense, more like that. And really they don't meet up until like the 80 to 100 page mark, and then the last 55 pages are the cat and mouse game, and that just felt very weird to me. The pacing just felt very off, and so I think the pacing and the tone just didn't really work for me in this book because of what it was trying to do. I think it just didn't really come together quite right for me. The other thing is the characters, they were whatever. Like, Jack is a Norman Bates knockoff wannabe. Like, he's got mommy issues. He thinks he's really smart and like cool and amazing, and like he's just really stupid. Like, every time I read from his perspective, I was like, I don't care about you. Like, you're just irritating to me. And he's like a terrible adversary to Meg. Like, he's not even good like competition, or like he doesn't do anything. Like, he's just meh. Like, he's just not very good. It was just, he felt like a waste of character to me. Like, I wish they had done something different with his character. Meg's character was fine. I didn't really feel one way or another about her. She was just kind of, okay, like, whatever. I know that the author definitely wanted you to like Meg, but I just don't think that it worked for me. Neither of them were really that exciting to me, and then the ending was extremely predictable. I knew where it was going really quickly, and it made sense, but it just was, it was fine. Like, nothing about this book stood out to me. It wasn't really brutal. It wasn't really bloody. It did have some brutality to it. It did have some like bloody kills and stuff like that, but like it just wasn't anything special or different or unique to me. And I really thought it was going to be something special because the plot sounds awesome, but I just wish it had had more serious of a tone and hadn't had that comedic, jokey side to it. And I just wish it had been more serious because I think this book could have been great. It just really didn't work for me at all. Next up are the 3.5 star books, and first up we have House of Hollow by Crystal Sutherland. I really wanted to love this book so much more than I did because so many people told me I was going to love it, and I know so many people do love it, but for some reason this just didn't do much for me. This story is about three sisters who went missing when they were younger, and they came back a month later, and it was just like this really bizarre occurrence that happened, and they had no memory of what happened. They just remember coming back, and that was it. And now the sisters are very weird, and they just have this like weird aura around them, and people are like obsessed with them, and very strange things happen to these sisters. And then the oldest sister ends up going missing again, and the two sisters go on a search for her to figure out what happened and if it's connected to what happened to them in the past. So the first half of this book really, really grabbed me. It really got me. I was like, ooh, yes, I really, really like the idea of this. This is very fascinating. It's mysterious. Like, I just have to know what's going on. I have to know. And then we hit the halfway mark, and I was like, okay, nothing's really happening. And then the end happened, and I just didn't really care that much. It just really didn't get me after that. I just was over it. It was kind of a weird experience reading this book because a lot of the time it would suck me in and I'd be really excited, and then I would get to a chapter where I just didn't care anymore and I was like out of it. I was like, don't care, whatever. And then the next chapter would suck me in, and then the next chapter would push me away again, and it was just this weird tug of war going on with me, and it was very strange, and I just couldn't really figure out if I was enjoying it. I do think that it was interesting, and I do like the idea of it, but this is a horror fantasy magical realism, and I have a really big issue with magical realism a lot of the time. And unfortunately for me, I think the magical realism hindered this book because it just became too absurd and too fantastical that I just couldn't get around it with my brain. I was like, I can't read this anymore. I'm really over it. I ended up guessing which route this book did take to in the end, which was really disappointing because the route it took I wasn't really that excited about. I thought it was going to be something different and something a little bit more unique, and I just felt like it was an okay ending, but it wasn't what I would have preferred it to do. So I don't know. I just think the first half of this was really, really, really good, but the second half lost me, and it just became too out there and just too wild, but not in a good way. It was just a little too bizarre, I guess, for me. It's just not something that I really enjoyed, and I'm really sad about it because I feel like a lot of people really like this one, and I just couldn't get into it as much as everyone else could. Next in the 3.5 star category is Sadie by Courtney Summers. I feel like a lot of people are going to be sad that I don't like this one more. I don't think this is what I expected it to be. This book is about this radio personality who starts this podcast in hopes of uncovering what happened to this missing girl named Sadie. She went missing after the brutal murder of her sister Maddie, and you get alternating perspectives between the podcast and Sadie's chapters, and you learn about her journey to seeking revenge for her sister Maddie. Now, I thought this was a thriller, and I personally don't think this is a thriller book. I think it's more of like a contemporary mystery, I think. To be honest, I thought this was going to be more thrilling, and I think I went in with the wrong expectations because I was a little confused at first because I was like, this isn't really that thrilling. This is just kind of like, it's just unfolding in front of me, and like I already know where this is going. Like, it wasn't that surprising, I guess. And again, I think that's where I made the mistake of going into this thinking it was a thriller. To me, this book was incredibly slow. It took me a really long time to get into this book and to enjoy it. It took me about probably the halfway point I started actually liking it, but it took me a really long time to start getting into it. This book is really sad. It's really dark. It deals with a lot of heavy topics. I did like that they didn't go into a lot of graphic detail though, which was nice because I personally don't think I would have wanted to read all the graphic details. I think that just would have been too much for me, but it does deal with a lot of heavy subject matter. It's very dark. It's very sad. It deals with grief, obviously, and sisterly bond and sisterly love, which I thought was really beautiful and really sweet. And of course you have the revenge aspect. I think the revenge aspect wasn't my favorite just because, well, there are a lot of reasons why it wasn't my favorite, but also there wasn't really a mystery around this revenge. Like, you knew pretty early on what was going on with the revenge and what Sadie was doing, which I think was a little frustrating for me. Again, I thought we were getting a thriller, so I think I was just surprised that I knew so early on what was going on, and that just kind of ruined it a little bit for me. The interesting thing about this book is I actually preferred the podcast chapters to Sadie's chapters, which is very surprising because I don't read audiobooks. So a lot of people told me this was amazing on audio, and typically I don't love podcast elements where like I have to listen to audio for it to be really entertaining and like exciting, because I just don't listen to audiobooks. So for me, it was very interesting that I preferred the podcast chapters because Sadie's chapters were just very oddly written, in my opinion. I felt like Sadie was really oddly written. She was a very odd character, and like not in terms of her, but just in terms of how she like acted and spoke, and like it was just a very weird thing. And I don't know why she was written that way, because it didn't really match some of the things that like I feel like people would be like, oh, it's because of trauma. Yeah, but like she just didn't really feel her age to me a lot of the time, so it was very weird. I just didn't like the way she was written. It just didn't feel realistic to me. And then the last reason that I didn't really care for this book is the ending. The ending was horrible. I don't like that. I don't like endings where they don't answer questions, and this ending does not give you any answers or any closure, at least with one part of the story, and for me that was too big of a part. And so honestly, this book could have been a 4-star, but with that ending I had to knock it down because it was just so aggravating to finish the book and have those lingering questions that I didn't enjoy that. I didn't like it. It's really tough because I can see why people like this book, but I just think I went in with the wrong expectations, and it just isn't really a book that I would enjoy. It's just not for me. You know, I'm glad I gave it a try. I'm glad I read it, but I definitely think that Courtney Summers is not an author for me, unfortunately. This next book, I'm really not sure what I'm rating it still. It's between a 3.5 and a 4. I just really can't decide what I want to give this book, and I feel really confused by it still. I just don't know my feelings on it. And that is All the Dangerous Things by Stacey Willingham. I really wanted to love this one more than I did, and I still do enjoy a lot of this book, but there's just some issues I had with it. This book is about the main character, Isabel, who lost her son a year ago. Her and her husband were sleeping when their son was taken out of his crib, and they haven't been able to find him. And now, after a year has passed, Isabel is still looking for her missing son, and she ends up kind of teaming up with this podcaster to try and figure out what happened to her son, what really went down that night, and who is to blame. I really like the idea of this book. I think the plot is really interesting. It's something that I definitely like, and I really like the messages on motherhood and women's roles in society as mothers, and how there are societal pressures on women to be perfect moms. Women aren't supposed to ask for help because, you know, it's in their blood to be mothers. They just are supposed to be perfect. They're supposed to know how to do everything. They don't need extra help, yada, 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 you know. It's basically about how society puts women in this box for motherhood, and when things get hard or when they, you know, need help, it just isn't given to them. I also liked the messages on true crime and how it's not entertainment, it is real life. These are not just stories, these are real people who have had really horrific, traumatic things happen to them, and people use it as, you know, entertainment and don't really look at the bigger picture of true crime. I really enjoyed those messages in the book. I thought they were really well done, and I felt like I really related to them, and I just felt like the author did a really good job about that. My biggest problem with this book is it was extremely predictable. I guessed every twist, like every twist. There wasn't one twist that I didn't see coming, and that was so disappointing to me. It was so disappointing to me. I did not want to guess the twists of this book, and unfortunately I did. Again, the book was enjoyable, and I did like it, and I did have fun with it. I just wish that it had been a little bit more unique, a little bit more different, a little bit more twisty. I just feel like that it took a really typical safe route, which was unfortunate because I really wanted to love this one. And I really did like A Flicker in the Dark by this author. I think I gave that 4 stars, so I'm just not sure. I just feel like for her second novel, I was expecting a little bit more, and it just didn't really deliver. So unfortunately, I'm just not sure how I feel about it. There were really great things about this book, and I did enjoy it for the most part, but I just think it lacked that twisty, unpredictable element. Next up is a 4-star book, and that is What Lies in the Woods by Kate Alice Marshall. I have a lot of thoughts about this book, and I think it's going to be unpopular. I'm not sure. I think the ending is going to get a lot of mixed reviews, so I'm very interested to hear what others are saying about this book. But the plot of this one is about Naomi and her 2 friends. 22 years ago, they were playing in the woods as they did, and Naomi was attacked and stabbed 17 times. She did live, and the girl's testimony put away this man, Alan Stahl, who was a serial killer. Now, in the present day, however, you know, there's more to the story. They didn't quite tell everything about that day in the woods. This book, from the minute I started it, I was hooked. I was so invested in it. It is extremely bingeable. Like, I was flying through this book. I was so sucked in. I was trying so hard not to guess the twist. Like, I was physically fighting my brain, trying not to let it guess things while I was reading. I was like, every time something flitted through my mind, I was like, shut up, shut up. Just let me enjoy this, because I knew that if I guessed the twist, I was going to not enjoy the book as much as I would have if I didn't see it coming. With that said, I did guess the twist, unfortunately, and I was really sad about it, because I feel like, and this is where I think people are going to disagree, but for me, this ending was very safe. I think it was a very safe ending. I think it was the easy ending to do, which was extremely disappointing to me, because this book was actually fairly dark. Like, it did have a lot of dark things going on, and I feel like it could have really been pushed. Like, this author could have really pushed the envelope, right? Like, really, like, pushed it out there into the really dark parts. And I feel like the ending was really safe, and it really made me upset, because again, I guessed it and I was sad about it, because it's the one guess I was going to be the most mad about being right, and I was right, and I was so angry when I finished it, because I was like, why did you pick to end it like that? Again, I think some people are going to absolutely love the ending. I think just for me, probably being more of a primarily horror reader, I just wanted it to be more. I wanted it more, because the book could have really gone there, and it just didn't. The book is very eerie though, and it's very tense, and like I said, I was really sucked in. Like, it really grabbed my attention, and from the minute I was reading, I was like, woo, I'm flying through this. It's wild, and I loved it. I did have a few issues with Naomi, the main character, but I did give her a pass, because I do feel like a lot of her reactions and responses were due to trauma, and a lot of thriller characters are just, you know, they're like that. They don't do the smartest option. Sometimes they pick the dumb option to do. So, you know, I do give them a pass usually, and for Naomi, I did give her a pass because I do feel like her reactions were in line with her trauma, so it didn't bother me too much, but it was a little infuriating when something bad was gonna happen, and I was like, please stop, please don't do that, stop, just stop. And then she didn't, so, you know, but I did enjoy this book. I really am interested to see what people are going to think about the ending, because again, I think it's going to be like 50-50. I think people are either going to love the ending or they're going to absolutely hate it. I didn't hate it, but again, I just felt like it was the safe ending, it was the easy way out, and I really just wanted more from this book. Next up and last in the wrap-up, this is the only 5-star book I had, and I really liked this book, and that is Bad Cree by Jessica Johns. I actually got an arc of this in like November or December, and I didn't want to read it until January, but oh my god, I absolutely loved this book. So this book actually starts out really like hard-hitting, because the main character, Mackenzie, actually wakes up from a dream holding a severed crow's head. Like, she wakes up with it in her hands, and she had been having a nightmare, and that's what this book is about. The main character is having these nightmares that have to do with her sister, and her sister is actually dead, and she kind of starts freaking out because they're very eerie, weird, bizarre dreams, and again, she's bringing things in from her dreams to the real world, which is, you know, not normal. And her friends end up telling her that she should go home and talk to her family about it, because her family is worried about her. They think that she's kind of having a hard time because the anniversary of her sister's death is coming up, and they think it's more of like a grief reaction. But when she starts telling them about it, and the fact that crows are actually following her, you know, they start getting a little bit more worried. This book is so atmospheric, and I'm telling you right now, it is so beautifully written. This book is so descriptive. I could see it in my head. Like, And I'm not talking about descriptive to the point where you're like, oh my god, we get it, shut up. I mean, this was literally just like painting a picture in my mind. I could so clearly see what the author was telling me to envision. It felt like a movie. It just felt like I was watching a movie while I was reading this book, and it was so interesting. The atmosphere was absolutely terrifying. Like, I'll be honest, this book was really creepy, very eerie. It felt like I could feel what was happening in the book, like I could envision it. Like I said, it was in my head, but also just like the feelings. Like when the main character was feeling cold, I just started getting cold. I was like, oh my god, yeah, like this is very cold. I'm very scared. Yes. This is also a slow burn, which is not usually my favorite kind of horror book. I'm not usually a fan of slow burn because I think it usually takes too long, but for some reason this worked so well. It was beautifully timed. Like the pacing was wonderful, and like that's saying a lot from me when I hate slow burns usually, because if it's that slow I am annoyed. But the slowness isn't a hindrance to the book. It's actually so helpful, because with the atmosphere and the descriptiveness and the slowness, it just made such a beautiful like timing. I know that sounds very strange, but like once everything came to a head, I was like, oh my god, oh my god. And it just was like goosebumps everywhere. I was like, this is so scary. It was really scary. This book does deal with family and grief. It's a very grief heavy book. You can feel it while you're reading it. You can feel the grief. It was a tough read, but like it was also very beautiful, because I don't know, the addition of the family part really got me. I don't know, it was just like, it was beautifully done. It also has to do a lot with guilt. The main character is carrying a lot of guilt. I can't really go into why, but you really learn why she's carrying all that guilt and how it really is affecting the situation and what's happening. And it's very interesting. This also is a supernatural horror, which I loved, and oh my god, when everything kind of unfolded towards the end and everything started to make sense, I was like, this is absolutely spooky. Like, it was very eerie. I can't imagine, like, if I had put myself in this position, I would be terrified. And then the ending was chef's kiss. I loved this ending. It is 1000% an Aaron ending. This is what I love in horror. I love to see it, and I loved the ending. When I finished it, I was just like, this was an incredible book. This was amazing, and I am so blown away. I think if you're looking for an Indigenous author to check out and you love supernatural horror and this sounds like something you'd like, I highly recommend. This was so wonderful. I will 1000% be watching this author because I need to read more from them. This was just so good, and it was one of the best books I've read in the last like 5 months. So I highly recommend this one. Alright my friends, that is the end of my January wrap up. Again, these were just the books from the second half of the month, so go check out my recent reads to see what I read at the beginning of the month. But I had a very interesting month, a lot of okay books, a lot of, you know, some good books, but Bad Cree by far was the best book I read in a really long time, and I really highly recommend that one. Let me know if you enjoyed this format, if you felt like you got more out of this, if you felt like my reviews felt a little bit more thorough for the book, you felt like you got a little bit better of an understanding than when I do my big wrap-ups and I kind of can only talk for like 2 or 3 sentences about each book. So hopefully you enjoyed this more and it felt more helpful to you. Please let me know in the comments, because if you don't like it, I will go back to doing my regular wrap-ups, I promise. Let me know what you read in January. Let me know what your favorite book of the month was, what your least favorite book of the month was. I would love to know. And if you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. It lets me know that you enjoy this new formatting we're trying out. It lets me know that you enjoy wrap-ups, you like to see what I read for the month. And if you haven't subscribed already, feel free to do so. We can become friends, talk about books, horrifying books, thrilling books, romance books, manga, all that good fun stuff. And with that being said, I hope you are having a great day, night, morning, afternoon, wherever you are, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!